Welcome to the SPEAKPact podcast, where high-performing speakers and the producers who hire them merge to give you the insider secrets to the lucrative speaking industry. Antoniette Roze, your podcast host and celebrated speaker agent, unveils insider success strategies. Discover a nexus of thought leaders and bookers, maximizing your potential in each and every episode. Your ticket to ultimate speaking success begins right here. Catch the transformative insights waiting for you on the SPEAKPact podcast, hosted by the industry powerhouse herself, Antoniette Roze.
Welcome back to SPEAKPact. We are thrilled that you're here with us today, and I have a master in branding with us today, and we're going to talk about why that's important to you as a speaker and why cutting corners in that area is not a good idea. Henry Wong, welcome to the SPEAKPact show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited about what we're going to dive into, and we're going to go ahead and start with a little bit about you, why you are someone that people would want to listen to. You definitely come packed with a punch, and so I will share that. You are a brand strategist, a speaker, and the author of Telling Your Story, Building Your Brand. But what's interesting is you're pretty modest about it because you've worked with some biggies. You're former executive vice president and creative director at the ad agency Saatchi & Saatchi. That's a pretty big darn deal. And you've led brand work for global organizations such as Toyota, Procter & Gamble. Today, you help organizations and leaders sharpen their market position, key message, and their bigger brand story. And that's something I was really interested in diving in with you here a little bit, is what's the difference between a brand story and kind of that umbrella bigger brand story. So first and foremost, what got you into this space? What made you interested in the power of the brand?
You know, I think it's been my long career in advertising. So in spite of my somewhat boyish look, I've been in this industry for close to 30 years. And I found a certain amount of impermanence in doing ad campaigns. You know, you'd create a campaign, it'd get out in the market, people would talk about it, it win some awards, but it was very fleeting. It would just simply disappear. So, if I talked about some of the ad work I did from, 10 years ago, you may remember it, you may not. The thing that I found was more of a permanent aspect was really the brand itself. The things that you pick up off the shelf, the name, all of that led me more into helping companies position and brand them. And the best way to do that is through stories so that you can connect better with it. So the whole aspect of building a brand is far more important than the tactics itself. And it's really been my go-to in terms of connecting with a lot of leaders and up and coming and mid-growth and large companies find their way to success in the marketplace.
How long did you say you've been in the industry?
Close to 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do look amazing. That's
another
interview.
I think it's a little bit of perhaps the makeup or the virtual touch-ups that happen. But thank you.
Thank you. Virtual touch-ups. Love. So when you first got into advertising versus 30 years later, today, is the baseline still the same? Is the foundation still the same? Or because I know how do you say? So the execution has changed, but as far as the brand foundation, has that held true, or has there been a good shift there as well?
Yeah, you bring up a really, really excellent point because, when I first started, it was very easy just to create a campaign. You came up with a TV commercial, maybe a couple of magazine ads or a billboard, and then you spent the rest of the time in the pub, celebrating. But these days, for the same amount of budget, you have to do so much more, everything from social media to, online sales through to different B2B support, and on like this. So it's so multidimensional that it has created quite a challenge for most brands and even people who are looking to position themselves in the market, quite a bit of a challenge. But at the heart of it, and which is what I think you're getting at, is the story has never changed. Your positioning in the market, how you go about putting yourself out there doesn't change. How you might bring that to light has, but the core positioning, the core brand that you're looking to create remains pretty much the same in how you connect with people.
And yeah, I really feel, correct me, because this is not the core of my space,
Hmm.
but obviously I deal with branding and getting speakers promoted, but it hasn't been my main profession. And what I have seen is the easier information is to access, the more important the story becomes. Like before, information was kind of
Hmm.
important because it was a little harder to get, especially in the 80s, the 90s, it was getting a little bit easier and so on. But now it's just everything is at your fingertips. So I'm finding that in your brand, information is not as important as why you're unique and what you can bring that information can't. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the information that you're describing is everything that is, let's say, about us as speakers. There's so much out there. There's so many other people sharing similar information. So how distinguishing yourself really is what makes you unique in the marketplace. What makes you different is what makes you stand out. So I'm a strong advocate of finding that unique position that you may be able to exploit and share with people.
Mm, so good. Okay. So why, I mean, we're not a product, or are we? Why is brand positioning so important to speakers and corporate trainers?
Yeah, we are in fact a product. We're putting ourselves out there in a way we're trying to sell ourselves. So the more people can think of themselves in that way, the better they are at being able to connect with their intended consumer, in this case, the clients that are looking to hire us. So the whole idea of a brand, of course, is to tell that unique story, that unique way of connecting with your intended audience so that you can stand out in the marketplace.
You have a really unique approach to narrative intelligence versus just storytelling. Can you talk to us a little bit more deeply about that? I'm sure your book goes into that, but just kind of the short synopsis, and then I will recommend that people pick up your book for the deeper dive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, in reality, my book, what I began with the initial book was telling your story, building your brand, which was really about connecting with people on an emotional level through story. What makes your message unique is typically your story. And what I found was, of course, many people speak about story. That seemed to be a very common approach to brands, to people. I need to work out my story. I need to figure out it's all about storytelling, we would say. But there's another aspect to it that often people ignore, and that's the intuitive ability to tell the right story at the right time. And that's really the heart of what narrative intelligence is, your ability to sense and shape the story so that you can motivate people, persuade them in a certain direction. And that comes from a little bit less of a framework. So my first book is really about creating that framework of what your personal brand is. The second book, which I'm currently working on, is more focused on those intuitive sensory abilities that you have to tell the right story.
Okay, I see it. And I also see it. I love that you said, sense and shape, because you can feel the room. You can feel what they're leaning into, what they're resonating with, and what's kind of
Hmm.
maybe checking them out a little bit or just not landing quite as strongly. So it's not that you have to change the whole story. It's maybe in the way that you deliver it or what you emphasize. But I do recommend that every speaker has a bank of stories, has a story bank, because different audiences are going to respond differently to different stories. So how do you deal with that? Like, are you every talk you use the same story and you just kind of sense what you're going to emphasize? Or do you also have, if you're going to be speaking to a room full of engineers, stories that you would utilize for them versus maybe a room full of truckers, right? That you
Mhm.
talk to us a little bit about your
Exactly. Yeah, and I think you pointed exactly to what we as speakers really should be doing, understanding the audience and who we're engaging with. So, a room of truckers is very different from a room of engineers, and we have the advantage, of course, of knowing that information ahead of time, or we should, before you take an engagement, before you stand in front of people, you do want to know who the audience is. And that should be part of the protocol of you engaging with the organizer and finding a little bit out more about the audience. What are they looking for? What are the hot spots? What are the areas that we should avoid? And then shaping that content is really, really important to be able to steer it in the right direction. I hear from a lot of speakers who say, well, I have this talk and I deliver it. This is what I get paid for, and they're very rigid in terms of not wanting to adapt to the audience. But you can find that that type of content doesn't work for everyone. There's a talk. I've just recently Eric Schmidt, formerly of Google, gave a commencement speech to the University of Arizona, and it fell flat, unfortunately, because he was very focused on how AI is going to overtake and become the next big wave and really control a lot of the jobs, control a lot of our production and so forth. And the audience, of course, was not open to it at all. You have young students looking to be inspired, looking for that hope, looking for that ability to succeed in the world, ended up booing him, unfortunately.
Oh my
So it's
goodness.
like, yeah, and so it's
Speaker's
unfortunate for him.
nightmare.
But
But yeah, he did
yeah,
not do his
yeah,
homework. Like, why
yeah,
would
and I
you?
think yeah, exactly. That's exactly what you want to do. And even if you do the homework, if you sense the room moving in a certain direction, and that's where that narrative intelligence that I talk about should hopefully guide you a little bit, where you can adapt. And you provided a very handy tip, which is to have a host of stories available, so that if it's going in a certain direction, you should have that available to pull out and adapt your current talk. And I think most good speakers do this. Sometimes we find that a story ends up taking too long and you're running out of time, so you end up having to truncate it and give a Reader's Digest version of it. Of course, that's narrative intelligence, and that's the ability to shape and adapt accordingly. But the whole idea of knowing the audience is fundamentally the key thing. Whether you do it live or whether you know ahead of time, to adapt your talk, to adapt your stories to that audience.
I think, Henry, some people, it just kind of comes naturally. They just have that innate ability to discern. And others, they need to somehow find that muscle and flex it. Do you have some practices or some practical ways that somebody can strengthen in that area of reading a room, predetermining what stories they should bring with them, but also you take it a level further, which I love, even as you're telling that story, being able to feel how it's landing and adjust. How do you develop that muscle?
A lot of people are so focused on their point of view that they ignore the listener, the receiver. In my world, it's typically the consumer. Of course, you're looking at who is consuming your content or consuming your product, and you need to understand them and adapt for it. So one of the things that I recommend people do is just simply listen more. Epictetus is a Greek philosopher. He says we have 2 ears and one mouth so that we can better listen before we speak.
Mm.
And quite often we don't do that. We're so focused on telling our own story or sharing what we're all about that we ignore everybody around us. So one of the best exercises I find is just simply pausing and listening. My favorite thing to do is just riding public transit. My family makes fun of me because I rarely take public transit, but once a month I try to get out on a streetcar and just simply observe the world around me. And it's a wonderful exercise. If you're standing in line at Starbucks, if you're just in a crowd, just pause for a moment and take in everything. And don't just look at what's going on, but try to imagine or understand the story that they're living in. Because the whole idea of behind narrative intelligence is understanding the story that people live in. So you may understand and have a good sense or a good EQ, and you sense someone's a little bit off and you might react to it, but you may not understand it. If you begin to fill in the blanks or use probing questions or simply project your ability to understand the story they're in, suddenly you become a better adapter to what that situation is. So, as a speaker, if you're sensing where everybody is sitting at that moment, you can adapt accordingly just simply by observing. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. There's no secret to it. People who have had a hard time understanding or even getting to the point of having a strong emotional quotient need to practice that. But that's level one. Level two is then understanding the story that's driving that emotion that's either in the room or in that person at the moment.
That is so good. Okay, so we know if you want to build a bicep muscle, you got to pick up the weight. We
Mm-hmm.
all know it's picking
You
up
got
the
to
weight or
flex it.
doing the
Yes.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
We know that, but unless you actually pick it up and do it, you're not going to develop that. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, first of all, listen and notice, and then start flexing that muscle, start practicing it. And as you do, you get better. You hone the skill of being able to discern how a message or a story is landing.
One of the things I think we as speakers are so good at are telling stories and sharing things. And again, sometimes we're so focused on telling our own story that we ignore the second part of the conversation. One of the best ways to reinforce what I said earlier is just in a conversation, allow that other person to speak, because then you get in the habit of conversing rather than speaking to them. We get often so used to talking to a crowd that we forget that, oh, I'm not on the clock right now. It's okay for me to pay attention to what someone else is saying. And in doing so, that allows you to hear their story and how you might be able to intersect with it, how you might be able to dovetail with their story. And then you have a true conversation with people in that way, and you're building on each other.
Ooh, I so resonate with what you're saying. I don't do this very often, but I'm going to get a little spiritual here.
Mm,
'Cause there's a little bit of a journey I've been on lately, and there's two things that came to mind. It may feel unrelated, but for me, it's really resonating as being related. So the first is ask and you shall receive, right? It's on that beautiful ancient book of wisdom that many of us
yes,
are
put that
familiar with.
energy out there. Yes, very much.
And I think we get caught up in the ask, but how do you receive? You can't really receive unless you just shut up, get quiet, and then you know it's there, it's coming. So I really feel that when we have our agendas and we have our checklists and we get up on stage, or even when we're preparing for stage, it's all about us, like kind of like what you said, and how are we going to look? How are people going to accept us? When we're on stage. But if you just get silent, I love the way you said that, and really just soak into what people are feeling right now. What's the mood of people in general, just by going to a public place, and then do your homework ahead of time. What's going on in this industry that they're dealing with day in and day out? What kind of stressors are they feeling? When it becomes about them, it becomes a lot easier to hear or to understand what it is that they might be needing, so you can deliver it in a fresh, authentic, relatable way, and they can actually do something with that. I feel like even, in prayer, we ask, and we're like, darn, I'm not getting any answers, but we never stop to really listen to what the message coming back to us is, because we've got our own agenda going. I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but
Hmm.
as you were speaking, that's kind of the direction I went.
Yeah, no, that sounds wonderful. And so much of how we open ourselves up energetically to each other does make a difference in terms of how we really connect and converse with each other. So in a room, of course, you're dealing with a multitude of different emotions and people, and hopefully they're in a common place that will allow you to understand them and so-called woo that crowd. And that often comes not necessarily by unlocking some secret message that you put out there or something that content is so great. It's finding something that applies to their life, how it may impact them, whether it's their professional life or their personal life. That's how you woo a crowd. That's how you get people on your side, because you're able to understand what they're all about and be able to speak to that.
You're so right, Henry. And when people feel understood, they trust that you understand them, then they can trust that you
Mhm.
have the solution for them. They feel like you don't understand them, you really don't even care who they are. I think that's the biggest bridge. That really separates a speaker who is sought after and remembered after the talk than the one who, oh, that's great, I got some good notes, it was pleasant. I think that's what really set once, I mean, even in your personal relationships, when you feel heard and understood, you can get somewhere, right? Otherwise, it's really hard for you even to hear what the other person is saying.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful way of putting it as well, because we know that a good talk isn't necessarily one to many, but you're really, in a way, having a conversation with your audience. So people feel as if you're speaking to them personally and directly, as opposed to a canned sort of presentation that you're providing to 100 people.
Yeah, I heard I do a lot of reading, so I'd like to give this credit. I don't remember where I read it, but it was very
Mhm.
recently, within the past week. I love hiking. I'm in the mountains. It's something I really really love doing, and something I read said, "Don't be in nature, be part of it, be of the nature." And again, a little bit of a stretch, but I feel like that's the same with your audience. Don't be in the room. Don't be on the stage. Be part of it, part of what they're feeling, part of what the solution that they're looking for. Kind of a fun.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. And we often know that it's the first 10 seconds of our talk where you get a feel of the room. And for me, if I can get people to react emotionally, I feel as if I'm connected with them, whether it's a subtle little joke or a way of just reaffirming their life in some way. It goes so far to make you really part of their crowd, as opposed to an outsider coming in and speaking. So it is challenging. We know this. How do you form that connection with people when there are 100, 200, 300 people in the room? It's very difficult to, but we learn techniques, of course, that you're looking for ways to address each and every one of them, although it's done in a very broad way. And in doing so, then you be able to form that connection on a mass scale, of course, by being in that room, being in the nature of that crowd.
We've all heard a speaker who is speaking to a large crowd, yet it feels like they're speaking directly to us. And you hit the nail on the head. If you can do that, that means you've done your homework, and that means you care more about the audience than you care about yourself. And I think that if we're speaking to 1,000, we're speaking to one. If we're speaking to one, we're speaking to 1,000. When was the last time you got nervous helping a friend? Like, if you're just sitting and talking with someone you genuinely care about, you're not thinking, is my hair in place? Do they think I'm
Hmm.
speaking quite right? You're thinking about them and helping them solve a problem they might be facing, or come up with solutions to getting to the next level of whatever it is that they want to get to. And I really feel that that is so strongly important, whether you're speaking to a room of 5 or 5,000. If you can master that art of making each person in that room feel like you understand them and you're speaking directly to them, then they can accept your story. And I think that's the way to do it, is through story. You talked about just that emotional reaction. You're getting them past the, okay, what is this guy going to try to sell me? What is this, life with a meeting, yet another meeting? Like, is this going to do me any good? This meeting going to do? And once you connect on an emotional level, then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm here. I'm in the right place with the right people. listening to the right person. And that's
Yeah.
what you really want to get in this. I think you said first 10 seconds. Did you say? Like 10
That's what
minutes?
I find. I get a sense of the room within that first little bit. If they're tired, if they are lively, if they're, facing outside stresses that they're bringing in. Knowing that, I think allows you to hopefully adapt accordingly. I think it becomes even harder these days than it did before because, we're doing a podcast. We're connected. We haven't met each other in person, but we're talking to each other through camera. So for many of us, doing this to a live audience on camera is even harder because you don't have a room to read. You don't have a sense of who's on the other side. Or hopefully you have an ability to be able to get a sense of that. But it's much more difficult, of course, through this computer camera than it is to do live, of course. And what you're trying to do is at least project your own humanity, your own sense of story, and the way you share that will allow people to connect with what you're saying.
You're so right. This acts kind of like a veil. Whereas when you are in person, the veil is removed. You can just touch one another in a different, I'm not even talking physically, but there's just a
Hmm.
different level of connection. It's all
Yeah,
good.
and so many of us really thrive on the energy of the room. So what happens when the room is all virtual and you're really just engaging with yourself in a way by looking into the camera at that point?
Right. I have a story about Anthony Robbins on that one. I've had the privilege of working with his enrollment events,
Oh, okay.
co-producers. But
Hmm.
when the whole craziness happened, his UPW had to shift to virtual, and he was very, very resistant to that. Understandably, I mean, he is a very kind of emotionally charged room. How is he going to create that? But as you said, there are strategies, there's ways to do it. And he did it. And he went from a typical room of 7,500 to, I think, over 22,000. It was a record. And there are benefits but you need to understand the process and the strategy and work it. But he was able to touch 22,000 lives that would not have paid the high cost of getting all the way to Florida and be in the expensive hotel, and from all over the world. And it had an incredible impact on way more people than would have been if they would have just continued as
Yeah.
usual with the UPW. But the only reason why I say that is mastering it in a live room, very important. But especially if you're going to target corporate trainings, which I recommend. Also, being able to master that emotional connection through a screen is equally as important, probably a little more challenging, probably a little
Hmm.
harder. So, my question to you, so there's kind of the bigger brand story, and we all know kind of different speakers. We can say, oh, their big brand story is, I don't know, the Apple guy in a garage with a friend
Hmm. Yeah.
tinkering with computers, right? And I mean, that, what an incredible story. um and we all have that kind of bigger umbrella story, but then there's what, I hope I'm saying this right, but anecdotal stories or supportive stories throughout your talk. First of all, how do you, because we all have multifaceted lives, how do we hone in on the one bigger brand story that is going to kind of precede us in front of any audience? So there's going to be all different kinds of audiences. And then I think we've already spoken about this, but then choosing those more supportive stories, I feel like that part's easier than the bigger brand. I'll let you
Hmm.
take it away from here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you use the key word supportive, which is really meant to suggest that every other story you tell should really help to prop up your main story. Your main story really is a reflection of your positioning in the marketplace. What makes you different, and how do I show this to people? So if I say I'm a very engaging speaker, then I need to prove it in some way. So your stories would have to reflect that. I talk on storytelling, and one of the stories I often share is how I grew up in the back of a Chinese restaurant. When I was old enough, because my parents didn't speak a word of English, I became front of house and I became the translator and I became the sort of the little kid behind the counter would serve the customers. And I found that by sharing stories, telling jokes, they would actually give me more tips as a result. So I began to hone that ability at a very young age. But the idea is that story has always been the basis of my life and everything I've done in my advertising career, of course. Commercials are really mini stories, ads are really mini stories. So I've been a little bit more attuned to that. But that main overarching positioning is me and story, and every story I share, such as that one, helps to support it. So whether you have a long one or a main story or a supportive one, it really doesn't matter because each one is meant to support your main position. So each of us have a unique position in the marketplace. What you're trying to do is just find any number of stories that help to that you could plug in and help support it. And depending on, as we talked about earlier, depending on the audience, whether it's 101 or 100 or 1000, you're going to find that appropriate story to share with that group within that type of audience. So the idea is to have enough of that arsenal available to you so that you can pull it out at any given point, of course.
Do you have some strategies on how to craft a compelling narrative? Because we've heard one person can tell their story and it's just so gripping and you get something out of it. You get, without them saying, I'm telling you this so that you can get this lesson out of it. It just kind of organically, naturally happens. Whereas another person tells their story and it feels like it's kind of self-serving and holy goodness, get over the story so we can get to the, so we can move on.
Yes, exactly.
What's the recipe?
The recipe or the one of the defining points is always to find that emotion in the story so that people can feel what you're feeling, whether it's fear, whether it was anxiety that I came over and then I netted out success, whether it is a similar challenge they're facing. Identify that emotional core that would allow people to come along for the ride because then they're there with you. And we find this true with anything we watch on streaming, anything we watch at the movies. If we feel emotionally invested in the characters, we come along with them. So the idea, of course, is to make people emotionally invested in your journey, in your story along the way. And of course, by understanding who they are as the audience, it allows you to do that. So that's a general framework. The rest really comes from a lot of practice, as you know. But the more you can make it a true story as opposed to just a litany of activities or events that happen, the closer you can come to being able to connect with people, of course.
Do you ever recommend, like, how far removed from the pain of the story should you be before you put yourself out there and share it? Like, if it's still raw or you have some parts of it that are unresolved, do you recommend skipping that story, or how do you approach something like that?
It really will have to depend on the individual. You look at Chris Rock, any of the comedians, Chris Rock in particular, the big slapping incident that happened at the Oscars where he was hosting, it took him a little while to be able to absorb everything, to process everything. But then it became the basis of an entire stand-up act, and it became the basis of what not partly what defined him, but it made for a wonderful engagement with the audience, and they came along with him. Trevor Noah just recently did this because he had hosted the Emmys, and he had in a subtle way criticized the president, and that became the basis of his discussion and his latest stand-up as well. So I think each of us are wired a little bit differently, of course. If it becomes fodder for, my family often accuses me, you love just going out there and finding things that just so you could tell stories about. And that may be true, but it becomes part of who we are as storytellers. So finding the ability to process it through story is often, I think, our trick, our ability to handle things that may have been super emotional by sharing it, by turning it into something that we can, again, share with, lots of people becomes a wonderful way of taking it all in and having it part of who we are as speakers and storytellers.
I think that's so right. If you can, I mean, the last thing you want is for an audience to pity you. So if you can share a painful moment in a way that draws them in to go deeper with you, I think
Yeah,
that,
it's not that we should be manipulators, but in a way we are manipulating a bit of emotion. We know that if I share this, I will get sympathy votes perhaps, or if I share this, it will get people laughing. If I share this, it will get them to cry perhaps. And it's not that we are manipulating, but we understand the power of the emotion, the power of the story that we're going to use to support that to get people to think or feel a certain way, of course.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said. Even about the president, love him or not love him, he's actually been a really great example of that, right? And the people who rally him, they're called deplorables. So now they have deplorable T-shirts, and they kind of play that up. He was called, I don't know, some sort of a trash man or whatever, and then all of a sudden he's got this big dumpster truck. So I think that that
Yeah,
is
no,
really a
no,
mark.
no comment. I mean, there's good and bad with everyone, and it's not that I'm a Trump supporter, but I think there's a very unique personality that has become fodder for a lot of discussion, and whether that's has helped fuel us in many of the comedians or the speakers or not, really goes to the heart of the content that we're trying to do. But I think the point that you're making, of course, is that if it helps to advance a point or to draw a conclusion from, yeah, draw upon your stories, draw upon what's happening in the world, draw upon the emotions that might be needed to help steer it in the right direction.
Yeah, I consider myself more a more deeper speaker. I do
Hmm.
I do draw an emotion. Obviously, you need to connect, but I don't consider myself naturally funny. So I have to draw from funny moments or moments that might have seemed painful that later I can laugh about in my own journey. And I think that that's just relatable. People can relate to that. They've had painful moments or unstable maybe moments. They lose their job or something that seemed like the end of the world, but yet here you are still wearing tennis shoes and still doing your thing, right? So if you
Hmm.
can just make it more, I guess what we're getting at is make it human, because humans relate to humans.
That's a perfect word. Make it human. I think we all want to connect with others on some fundamental human level, and if you could do that broadly, then you found that secret to delivering a great talk, of course.
Yeah, okay, so about this time of the show, I know there's plenty of people that want to know, how do we get a hold of Henry Wong? I'm certain your book and book to come very soon, hopefully, are on Amazon. But other than that, how do you like to be found? Where's the best place to reach you?
LinkedIn is usually the best, and for our audience, if you connect with me at LinkedIn, I guess it's Henry Wong Brand. You'll find in that, I think you'll share a link, but if you DM me, if you message me and ask for a copy of my book, I'll send it to you electronically. I'm very happy to do that. So I
Wow.
just want to
Okay, so
be able to share some of the things that I've learned over the years in a controlled way that would allow people hopefully to benefit in their own career, their own development as a speaker or a careerist at that point.
that is so generous. And are you hearing the construction guys next to me? They're just like
Oh,
banging behind my head and right
oh
outside my
no,
window.
not
Um,
on my end, but yeah.
Good, because my red light keeps. Okay, so it's Henry. How I got to your website? Sorry, to your LinkedIn. Henry is Henry Wong Co.
Yeah, that's my website. So yeah, by all means, connect with me there.
And
There's
your
a link to
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yeah,
It's yeah, LinkedIn.com/in/Henry Wong Co. Or do you have a second one you prefer people go to?
brand Henry Wong Brand.
Okay,
Yeah,
Henry Wong Brand. I'm going to go there too. That's a very, very
yeah,
generous gift. And then it's no tricks, Henry, Henry Wong,
yes.
Wong. We have a lot of listeners who listen to us while they're working out or walking who might not be seeing your name on screen, but also you can always check our show notes. We'll make sure to have all the links to him there. All right. Well, I still have some questions for you, but I wanted to make sure
Hmm.
we let everybody know how they can find you. You just have a brilliant way of communicating the importance
Oh,
of a
that's really
brand, but
nice. Thank
also
you.
what makes you, what sets you apart from all the other people out there trying to maybe build their own brand in the same ecosystem or space that you are.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. Finding that unique take on it. There are so many speakers out there who speak on DEI, on leadership, on any number of topics, and really, what the unique ingredient, of course, is the speaker itself. You know, your roots, how you got to it, how your lens in which you're presenting that information should help you find that positioning that will make you unique enough in the marketplace.
So let's talk about unique, because I see people kind of gimmicky, trying to do something gimmicky that feels a little not authentic just so that they can stand out, versus someone who stands out in a more authentic way, but they still have a unique story that they bring forward. So again, kind of how do you synthesize what's unique about you in a way that is authentic and has, I guess, an invisible string to your particular audience, to the people that you actually want to reach?
hmm I think one of the keys is know yourself, to really get to understand who you are as an individual. One of the challenges, of course, is that we only see ourselves through the way we look at ourselves in the mirror. Um, what I felt, when I work on personal brands for leaders, for example, we do an entire audit, and that means interviewing people around them, their colleagues, their friends, their family, to get a true sense of who they are. They do a little bit of a questionnaire, or they do a self-assessment. And there's any number of self-assessment tools out there, because you may not have the ability to to engage with others to find out what you're all about. But if you can truly understand what you're about and make what makes you unique, then you can begin to build the fundamentals of truly positioning yourself in the marketplace. You may find that you have a unique lens, a humorous bent. You may have a very unique journey. You may have a unique place in which you are in life that people can identify. That becomes part of that positioning. Once you determine that, then your key messaging builds around it in terms of helping to support it. Quite often, there's no shortage of tactics in advertising. We used to joke that, well, we could run the ad upside down and people would pay attention to it. So you could have things and you could have tactics that would get people to pay attention to you. But then what? What's the point of it? The idea is to have that tactic support what your key position or your key message is, so that you can then fulfill it with a story in itself. I will share one thing, and it's a technique that we use for many of our pitches for people looking to either network or really understand how messaging works out in terms of connecting with your audience. And that I refer to it as 333, meaning you have essentially 3 seconds in the beginning to engage with someone. For many brands, it's often that logo. For us, it's often our picture or our topic that would allow people to understand who you are. The 30-second is being able to get a little bit deeper into it, where you can tell your story within 30 seconds, much like a commercial. Only then do you allow people to come in further, because quite a lot of us spend too much time on the last three, which is 3 minutes. And that's where now I have you hooked. Now I have you engaging with me, and I can tell you the longer 3 minute story. The idea is to understand that format, because many people tend to jump to the 3 minute version first, before really engaging them from the beginning and allowing their audience to give them permission to keep going. So I think with that, understanding the format and understanding how to tell your story is just as important as the type of story that you're putting out there, or the way that you catch people's attention.
I think that's so important. I always say to my speakers, do not French kiss on the first date if you want to build a lasting relationship. And this industry is all about relationships. And you said it so brilliantly. Those initial two steps are vital, because you're building the bridge to, people need to know why they care. You know, they don't know that they care until they know that they care. And that comes in those first two steps, the image, and then the highlights, And then you can
Hmm.
go a little bit deeper
The
versus,
deeper story, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
going, oh, I love that. Okay. Couple last questions, and then we'll have you give the SpeakPact audience a challenge. There's a difference between branding and positioning. I think you can brand brilliantly, but if you're not positioned, because where's the brand going to go? I think you can position brilliantly. I think that Madonna did that really well in the 80s. I'm really dating myself right now, but she wasn't necessarily the greatest singer. She So her brand couldn't be that she was just this brilliant singer, but she was really brilliant at positioning herself. And can you talk to us a little bit about that? As a speaker, we are a personality. We become a public personality. How do we position ourselves and brand ourselves effectively?
Again, it really comes back to what you're all about in that story. So, the example of Madonna, hers was always about reinventing herself. That became her brand. It became her mnemonic. And I think the key word is a mnemonic. Every one of us has a position, whether we've figured it out or not yet. But if you can build a mnemonic around what you're all about, then that gives you that 3-second trigger for people to understand the greater story that you're going to have behind it. So each of us have a different way in which we're presenting ourselves. So that may be that physical style, for example. And that's only one way, of course. So you spoke about Steve Jobs earlier, and what his signature, of course, was his black turtleneck and khakis. He did that, of course, because he didn't want to think in the morning about what to wear, but that became his signature. So if you saw a black turtleneck and khakis, you would know it's him based on what he stood for. But there was much more deeper aspects to that. So I think having that is quite important, and I've seen it in many of my colleagues. Some special, wear a bow tie, for example. Some have a unique hat. Some have a unique beginning. Some of that is just again triggers to the deeper story. I love it when organizers ask, what sort of intro music would you like on it? In the beginning, I used to think, oh, forget about, it doesn't really matter. But then I realized that in a way helps to support your brand. So if you have the opportunity, begin to build all these signatures, whether what you wear, the way you look, the way you might be introduced, should help to always impact it. And we do have that opportunity when you write up your bio and have it shared with people and have it introduced. Pay particular attention to it, because that's your unique opportunity to establish yourself in a different way that can allow yourself to connect with the audience.
There's a lot of really goodness there. And
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry.
like,
I threw
that
it
was
all
really
together. I think.
so much goodness. I know that there's plenty of people taking notes. Can you explain from a brand perspective what mnemonic means to you?
Oh, that's your symbol that would a logo, for example. So if I saw a simple apple, you would know it stood for the
Somebody might
computer
wear like
company.
a fedora hat or lime
Yeah,
blurring
yeah,
glasses.
exactly. So it's the same analogy, and you may not have a logo, but you could have a mnemonic that would become your signature and what you stand for. And I think it's the work that we would do and the exercise. I think you had asked me to do is think of how you could be represented by a symbol in some way is one of the exercises I would ask people to do. I'll give you another after, of course, but I think if we begin to understand what we're all about, then it becomes a way in which we can communicate more about our persona, about our person to the greater crowd.
So, do you feel like it's important to sit and visualize 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What do I actually want to be known for? What, how do I want people to perceive me or think about me? And then, and my message, and
Hmm.
who do I want it to reach? And what kinds
Yeah.
of transformation do I want it to happen versus kind of hitting the ground running, the reverse of that, actually
You know,
visualizing and
mhm.
then reverse engineering. Yeah, go ahead. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I like to think, I tend to Because I'm a bit older, I tend to think I have a little bit less runway than a lot of other people. I got into speaking a little bit later in life. It was only really the outcome of a career in which I was being called upon to speak that I realized that, wow, I have a lot to share and I would love to develop this and further this as a career. And this is what's really happening now, of course. So I would not necessarily counter what you say, but I'd like to think of myself a little bit more on what do I want to be today? What do I want to be known for today? Why wait 5 years? So envisioning how my life would be right, how it should be immediately if I was given that opportunity is what makes it more urgent. If I have a 5 year plan, and I used to do a lot of that, I go, okay, you're wanting to do this, you're two, it suddenly becomes a little bit more protracted in the approach. So now I tend to think, okay, where do I want to be today? Well, I want to be a full-time speaker who's traveling the world, booking and billing X amount per year. I'm well on that way, hopefully, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think in terms of a plan because each day is an opportunity, very much like the Japanese philosophy Kaizen, where I have an opportunity to progress. And if you have come in with that point of view, I think you can get hopefully there sooner and faster. And I think that was the difference that I made rather than wait or think that this is where I want to be in 5 years. I began to manifest it just by thinking, here's where I want to be today. And because I had that sense of urgency, I put out more proposals. I contacted more conference organizers. I sent out more emails. I put in more proposals in that shorter amount of time.
I love that perspective, and I'm actually going to soak into that because I was read recently. There's something I'm wanting to get to the next level of in my own life that seems a little lofty, and this material that I was reading was actually a very boring, dry scientific paper, but it basically said see yourself as if you've already achieved that. What does your day look like? How are you functioning? What decisions are you making? How how is that affecting how you're relating to people? All those things, like actually put yourself there. And that's a muscle I don't quite have just yet, but I saw the wisdom in it. And what you just said kind of to me is a bit related. Don't wait. I love what you said because we all have our 3 year goals or our 5 years goals. I mean, most of us have an idea of where we'd like to see ourselves, but actually live that right now, because otherwise you're just always going for the next thing and never really kind of soaking into where you are right
Very
now in your
much so.
personal life as
Yeah.
a speaker. Mhm.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think you have to act very much like you're in that success because success begets it, and you're doing more of it. So I think I've accelerated my ability to get on the speaking circuit just by thinking a little bit more like that because I had the groundwork, I had the foundation of everything. What are the components that I need to be able to achieve success today, and it's just working towards that, of course.
Okay, I know we're going long. This has just been such a fascinating talk, Henry, and thank you for being so generous with the information that you're giving. These are decades worth of solutions that you've come, I'm sure many of them hard earned. We try different things and we find what really lands, how to get that
Mhm.
amazing story that's going to connect together. I have a last question, and then we'll
Mhm.
go to our signature challenge. The last question is I mean, there's a lot of brand masters in branding who lead with story. Like how did you set your brand apart from maybe the 30 others that are kind of vying for that position, that speaking or corporate training position? How did you set yourself apart, and how do you continue to grow in that just yourself even? And then the
Mhm.
last question, because I'm going to let you take it away, is if you can leave a challenge with our SpeakPact audience on how something they can put into practice today so they can hone their own big, personal, beautiful brand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think one of the key things that I've been speaking on, and I've been very fortunate in that narrative intelligence gets me booked time and time again. So in the last 4 to 6 months, it's resulted in quite a few engagements and a lot of interest in it. And really, what it is, if you strip it all away, it is storytelling, but it's storytelling plus, and it's that what we talked about, that unique ability to intuitively sense the right story to tell. And a lot of leadership people may not have that ability. So putting that out there, finding that unique twist on already existing type of content is what has made me stand out a little bit more. So I would encourage other people, take your topic, and if you see other people doing that same variation of it, what is it that you can bring to it that might be a little bit different in terms of the content itself? What is the unique lens that you might be able to bring to it that would get you a little bit more interesting and booked, or even getting those calls that would allow people to find out more, of course. And again, it's, a lot of the things that we talk about may not be unique, but your perspective on it, your unique take on it is what can truly make it unique. And then I think for the final question, what sort of exercise I believe you asked that people can do that would allow them to further themselves. And again, if we play on my narrative intelligence topic, a great exercise is if you can spend time with someone else, share with them. And this is an exercise with two people. So you find a friend, find a colleague, and talk about a little bit of a challenge that you went through that day. So you tell the story, they listen for 1 minute, they tell their same story, and you listen, and then you reverse the roles. You tell the person's story and they tell your story. That forces you to listen a lot more to the audience. And it's a great technique to practice so that you can begin understanding that it's not all about you, that there's another person at the other end wanting to share their story. And in doing so, you can help adapt your story to theirs. So run through that exercise. Two people, 1 minute each. You exchange stories, and then you exchange the stories that each of you would tell back.
That's brilliant. I'm going to do that. I'm going to find somebody. I think that's a brilliant exercise. So SpeakPact audience, do that and comment back in the comment sections of wherever you're hearing this. We'd love to hear what kinds of insights it brought up for you, what you saw that you didn't see before. That's just really brilliant. Well, Henry, this has been an incredible interview, just value packed. Thank you for bringing all of your hard-earned wisdom to us today.
I really enjoyed hanging out with you. So it's been a wonderful, hour or so just hanging out, and I would love to do it again if you saw fit. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah, there's so much more I wanted to dive into, so we will definitely have to revisit. And it's Henry Wong Brand on LinkedIn. Definitely follow him if nothing else. Connect with him. He's offering you his book in digital form, so reach out to Henry. There's a lot more to him, a lot more depth than we even were able to get into in this short hour. Thank you
super
again.
Kind. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And to the SpeakPact audience, ciao, ciao for now.
Thank you for listening to the SpeakPact podcast. To become a recommended speaker of Antoniette's WPC speaker agency, or you are a host or planner looking for a dynamic expert in optimized performance, Antoniette would like to personally meet with you. Secure a time with her at speakerbooker.com. Again, that is speakerbooker.com. It all begins with a vision, a voice, and a pact to impact. Join the SpeakPact movement by joining our new private Facebook group at the link in our show notes. Find us on nearly every social media platform at One Antoniette. That's number 1, ANTONIETTE, or simply #SpeakPact.